Morning, Monday, October 6th, 2025. I'm Larissa. Oh, this is my video diary. Here we are. Here we are, drinking from skulls. Mm. Mm. Well, so much to say. So much to talk about, huh? Oh my goodness, I am so tired. Oh my goodness. Oh, I did not sleep well last night. No, I did not. I had trouble getting comfortable. Oh. Mm. Yeah. But all the bedding is clean. I washed all the bedding yesterday. Every single layer. I even washed my pillow. Yeah, it's very nice. Have a nice clean pillow. Oh my goodness. It even fluffed it up. Washing it, fluffed my pillow up. Let me fluff your pillow for you, madam. Yeah. Oh, so I have to say, I don't know very much about. I want to talk about Japan. First, I don't know very much about this Madame Takaishi, but I do know a little bit about Japanese culture, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. No, not an expert, but I have a little bit of experience and knowledge. And I have to say, congratulations for Japanese women. That is a glass ceiling for all women, in particular for Japanese women. And congratulations to you. Congratulations to you, Mrs. Takaishi, Miss Takaishi, and for all to all Japanese women. Congratulations. Oh. And I hope, Madam, is good for your country and good for your country's relations with its allies, including the U.S. No, I do feel that way. Anyway, yeah. So, also this morning watched a clip of well, I was drinking from my skull. My skull is almost empty right now. Sometimes I listen to other people while I drink from skulls. Right? So I know what the taste is inside of that skull I'm drinking. Right? Anyway, it's always the same taste as whatever my tea is. There's nothing special in my tea, in my skull. It's just a skull. It's just my favorite mug. That's all. Anyway, I watched this clip of some dude interviewing Mel Gibson about Hollywood, and I haven't been down to LA and Hollywood in a long time. I've only been down there a couple times, right? And it was long before the fires happened down there. But you're talking about how industry is moving out of Hollywood because it's too expensive to shoot there because of California. And I'm not surprised. They've been farming out all over the United States and other places in the world for a long time. When we first moved out here in 2000, 2001, that time, around that time period, they started filming to Detroit because it was so cheap to film there. It was a big deal. It was a bunch of stuff that was filmed in the Detroit area, and of course, with Marshall Mathers and all that stuff. There's a number of people from the Detroit area, from the Metro Detroit area: Madonna, Aretha Franklin, Marshall Mathers. Oh, who else? Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck actually moved there. They moved to Birmingham, which is a very wealthy suburb of Detroit. So like it's not new. We've been moving stuff out for a long time. And when we moved out here to California at that time, Gavin Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco. Um, and he was, young in his career or whatever. And his big deal in San Francisco at that time was labor labor rights, and he closed a lot of sweatshops, which a lot of people were happy about, but a lot of people weren't happy about because it drove up manufacture prices in the city of San Francisco. So there were a lot of things that used to be manufactured in San Francisco that people couldn't afford to have manufactured in San Francisco. And I learned about this at that time because I had my jewelry studio. I haven't made jewelry in so long, like really made jewelry, done silver work, because when we were in Oakland, I wasn't able to set up a proper studio after I closed down Studio 19 in Sunnyvale. And then a lot of my tools were broken and stolen in Oakland. So like I still have a lot of my tools and everything, and it would be great if I could set up to do that work again, but um, you know, anyway, I'd have to replace a lot of stuff and all that jazz, and I'm not sure my arm could take doing that work now that I've had this, because I do forged work. I do forged silver work. That's my niche. My niche is silver forging. And um, after hurting my arm when I was doing that wood carving, I'd like to do some wood carving again too, but I just have some concerns over the reverberation of hammer strikes. Anyway, I had a ton of jewelry. The jewelry that I have left now that I have fabricated is only a very small portion of what I fabricated. I fabricated hundreds of pieces at that time, because I was trying to break into the wedding market, the luxury wedding market in California. And I was doing a lot of wedding shows and things, and that were not well attended at all. Um, And anyway, I had all this work fabricated, one of a kind work fabricated. I gave a lot of it away because after I got kicked out of Meadow Art Gallery for having an Arab last name, because that is what that woman told me, I had a contract with her and she didn't want to carry my work anymore after she came back from a trip to Israel because I had an Arabic last name. Can't make this shit up. I couldn't get into any gallery after that. I couldn't get any gallery to even talk to me after that for any of my artwork. And when we moved, I was supposed to have a studio up in Santa Rosa. Oh, this is all a tangent. Anyway, I tried to get some of my work small batch fabricated in San Francisco. I wanted it to be locally fabricated. I had managed to talk to buyers from Saks Fifth Avenue and what was the other one? Nordstrom's. Both were interested in small line production. But they wanted a 2-week turnaround for fabrication. Well, I couldn't, when I say small line production, I mean 100 pieces of. So it's like I had a few designs and they were like, oh yeah, we like this, this, and this. And if you can get us 100 pieces in a 2-week turnaround, we'll buy from you. Well, I couldn't fabricate that myself. All of my pieces were my masterpieces, right? Like, and by masterpieces, I mean they would have been the piece that all of the other pieces were modeled after, right? So I was talking to manufacturers in bench manufacturers in San Francisco, and the price, for things was just I couldn't, and I couldn't I couldn't get a loan from anyone. Nobody in my family was willing to talk to me about it. They were like, "Oh, this isn't a real business." Blah 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 blah. Jewelry, what a nice hobby for you, Larissa. Blah 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 blah. Right? Like nobody took me seriously. Right? And then we another issue was my studio situation. So we ended up leaving Sunnyvale, right? And the reason that things were so expensive there when I was looking for bench fabrication at that time was because of the legislation that Newsom had passed on labor law, right? Like having to give people breaks, having to pay them a higher wage, not piecework kind of thing. Um, all that stuff. All that stuff. And so the price of fabrication had gone up, had jumped exponentially, right? When I talked, because I talked to like two or three fabrication houses that were in San Francisco at the time, and the one place, they all were similarly priced. The last place that I went to, I wish I could remember. It was a top floor of a high of a real tall skyscraper down in. It wasn't in Chinatown. It was outside of Chinatown, but it was close to Chinatown. And it was an Asian fabrication house. They had like six workers. It's six. He said they had six employees. Um, but he said to me, he said, we used to have 15 employees, but I can't afford to pay all of them anymore. So he said, I recently had to lay a bunch of people off. And I was like, oh, why? And that's when he's the one who explained to me. He's like, oh, well, there's new labor laws, and we had to. He said it's better for the people who are working here now. He said, but I had to let a lot of people go. And he said, if you had come in to see me a year ago, I could have made these pieces for you for a third of the price for each piece. So each piece was going to cost me for what I had. It was going to cost me like $1,000 to make on top of the materials. And I was like, whoa, right? Because these were silver pieces. And so there was a cost prohibition there because people don't want to pay as much for silver as what they pay for gold. There's inherent, commodity price, right? But the fabrication, the labor is the same, right? The labor is the same. And these pieces were very elaborate, and they weren't even going. He was talking about die pressing the components, as opposed to what I had done, which was hammer form. I sunk and raised and forged all my pieces, and he was talking about die pressing. Totally different, procedure, and not the same fabrication integrity as what I had done. It would guarantee that each piece was identical, however. So other than any variations in stones and things. So, like, the pieces that there were three pieces that I was looking at, inquiring about having fabricated. And that's what he was that's what he was quoting me. It was like it was going to be $1,000 a piece, each individual piece to fabricate, and that cost would include the making of the tool die. He said, he said the pieces would become less expensive to make down the line if it was a longer line of fabrication, but for the number for the run that I was doing, and all of that, because the main investment was in the fabrication of the dies that it was going to require to die press each of these components. Anyway, that's why I know about that, and so that changed the landscape of labor in California for manufacture. But the cost of living and all of that stuff, that was a reaction to cost of living, which has been out of control in California for a very long time. And you can't. Mel Gibson was talking in this clip that I was watching this morning, was talking about how I blame leadership. It's Gavin Newsom's fault and this, that, and the other thing. I'm not saying that Gavin's a saint, because he's not, and he did not handle shit during COVID well at all. That was bullshit. All of that COVID stuff was bullshit. I agree, totally agree, but with Mel on that. But you can't blame the inflation and the high cost of living in California and the high cost of doing business in California solely on Gavin Newsom. You can't blame it on him at all. This has been a problem that has been in the making for 65 years. Right? There was a whole bunch of legislation that was passed and the reason is 65 years ago, it's all of the infrastructure in California is old, roadways and everything, and that has been a big issue. And the last time that stuff was all attended to was in the last major build, which was 65 years ago here in California, right? And at that time, after that build, it's like everybody's like, "Oh, proud of California! California's so beautiful." You look back at nostalgia, at California nostalgia that was from that time on, right? And that was riding that wave of, oh, all this beautiful stuff out here on the coast that's new. Well, now it's not new anymore, and it needs replaced. And legislation that was passed back at that time to appease and reward the people who did the work at that time has now run out. So it's not an issue of Gavin Newsom screwed everything up, right? As a matter of fact, if you go back that far, you're looking at the Republican Party, right? So it's not all bad on one side, all good on the other side. No. This is an issue of California culture, right? And so prices went up, went up, went up, went up, went up, went up, went up. And the people who still, majority property owners in California are families and people from that time period who bought in when everything was still cheap. So like the house that we bought, our first house that we bought in Santa Rosa, it had been built in 1952 or 53, and our whole neighborhood that we lived in, those houses were all from that time period. And that particular neighborhood, like there were a number of other neighborhoods that had the same houses, and it wasn't like, it was kind of like tract housing, but they were a little more individualized. There were like 4 or 5 models of homes, right? Shapes of homes, styles of homes, and then they were built at different brackets with different levels of materials or whatever, or dormant on the outside. And there were a number of those neighborhoods all throughout Santa Rosa. So you see this overall architecture, and it's because the people the company that built them, it was like all the same, it was the same family of companies, right, that did this. Well, our particular neighborhood was reserved by the companies, right, up there, the construction, for their employees. And so the houses that our house and our neighborhood, what they weren't the most high end. Like they didn't have all the bells and whistles when it came to adornment on the outside and all that, but they were really, really, really sturdy and well made, because the houses that were in our neighborhood were built by the workers for their families. So they were able to buy those houses at that time when they were built at a lower price as a incentive, because they were employees of the companies that were building them. So I remember the guy that built our house, or the guy that originally the original owner of the house that we bought. We didn't buy it from the original owner. We bought it from the second owner, right? We were the third ones to own that house. Third, yeah, we were the third ones to own that house. The original owner, he had been an electrician. So like when we bought the house, we were told the electrical in your house is perfect. Like you'll have no electrical problems in your house, because the electrician who worked for the company, he did it for himself, right? So there's a lot of stuff like that in California history that you don't necessarily know. So even at that time, the original purchase price of that house, which I think was like, I don't know, I want to say it was like $22,000 or something. The original purchase price, that was below market value, right? Even at that time. Um, and when we bought it, it was $535,000, right? And that was in what, 2006, 2007, something like that. It was a little over $500,000. And that what not a big house. That was a house built in 52, 53, right? Yeah. And it was what was it? It was like 1,500 square feet, a little over 1,500 square feet, and on a quarter of an acre lot. Not big. Not big, right? Particularly by American standards, not big. Yeah, but it was, that was a lot of money, right? This has been an ongoing problem. Ongoing problem. When we purchased that house, we were the youngest homeowners on the street by far. We were some of the youngest homeowners in Santa Rosa. Other people our age, in our age bracket, in Santa Rosa that did own property, the ways that they owned it were either inheritance, they inherited the property from parents or grandparents, or they were in the marijuana business, they were in the cannabis business. That's who our financial peers were. And we did not have lots of disposable income. No, because right after we bought our house, there was the bubble in the market that burst, and we lost all of our equity. So we had purchased the house with the promise of equity to do some improvements that never got to happen. Because and then as a result of that, we were living kind of like hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. It was really tough. It was really, really tough. And that is the way California is and has been. And, for people like us who were buying in at that time, the people who were here long term, the ones who had accumulated wealth, like those down in LA, were doing so off of the backs of people like my husband and I. And it was greed out of the industry, right? Theft of intellectual property, the keeping people out of the industry, out of circles of being able to actually make money. It's really insidious. And so for Mel Gibson to do that interview and paint it as a picture of, oh, all of this in California right now is Gavin Newsom's fault and is a result of COVID, is not accurate. Not accurate at all. Gavin Newsom just happens to be the one in office when the fucking cyst bursts, right? And all the pus is coming out. But that cyst has been growing for a long time. And, I don't know. It's going to be, it's been rough going for a long time, and it's going to only get more rough going, you know? When Schwarzenegger was in office, things weren't any better for business in California. No, they weren't. Not for small business. Big business, maybe. Small business, no. And any healthy economy has to have a strong, local small business culture. California does not, right? Like, what I've learned having a small business in California is the majority of people who have small business in California, it's like a quote unquote hobby, right? Like, you don't expect to make any money. You can't even expect to break even. You have to have some other income somewhere to support your small business. So small business in California is largely facade, right? It's largely facade. And, hospitality and all that stuff, it's like, well, now you're going to actually have to be good in order to stay open, because there's going to be few people who can afford to even go out at all. right? And there's a large percentage of franchise restaurants in California, right? I think if you were, I don't know the numbers for sure, but if you were to look at GDP of just hospitality industry, right? If you were to take the GDP of just the hospitality industry, you would probably see that fast food industry has the highest GDP, right? It's not it's not fine dining or boutique dining kind of thing, or any of the other hospitality services. And it's why you see why there's been such a problem, particularly in California, with human trafficking in like spa industry, right? It's the nature of the beast. People come out here wanting to be, expecting, oh, I'm going to be a star. I moved out to California. Well, now Hollywood's closed down, so now that's a different thing altogether, and that's changing as well. Um, so it's kind of like a perfect storm. Um, that has caused a lot of problems. So I'm sorry, Mel, but I don't, I got my criticisms of Gavin too, but he is definitely not the mastermind behind the issues in California's economy. No, no, he's not. Just not. It's just not. It's just not true. It's just not possible, right? Gavin's like around my age. You know, Mel, you've been around a lot longer than Gavin has been. You're an old man. It's your generation. It's older generation that really caused these problems here in California. Your voting choices, right? And it's the same thing with like the wildfire issue and stuff. So I have some pieces in my gallery, work of mine, that deal with these oak beetle deformities in oak trees. I have some jewelry pieces and stuff. And I did the first pieces, the forged silver pieces 20 years ago, 25 years ago when we moved out here. I saw these cocoons, didn't know what they were, thought they were interesting shapes, and I was making them out of silver. Well, now I know what they are, having purchased second growth redwood property that has some oak on it as well, which is common, um, and being near oak groves. So this particular issue, when Medi-Cal when Medi-Cal was voted into being, money from the budget had to be moved. So it's why people had to vote on this. Everybody wanted Medi-Cal. Everybody wanted that. Right? Everybody wants I haven't seen any benefit from it personally, but I'm talking about what the history was. So they had to move money from somewhere. A lot of money came out of infrastructure maintenance, public works in California, things like Caltrans and state parks and all of that stuff. So when they laid off people who did maintenance work, right, they had to find other ways of dealing with it. And there were many different things that happened, but one thing was this stuff, Algerian ivy, was brought in to be planted in medians specifically as drought resistant ground cover crop to keep down weeds, right? Because one of the things that got laid off were the guys that went out with the lawn mowers and weed whackers and all the medians and cleaned up and did all that shit. So they put in this ivy. Well, it's an invasive species. And when it was brought in, of course, there was lots of it, and they started selling it as ornamental. People started planting it, right? So, like out here in the redwoods, there's all this Algerian ivy, right? Well, the Algerian ivy starves the redwood trees. Well, redwood trees have been around a long time. And they got upset, and they're like, hey, there's an invasive species here and it's killing us. And they sent out a distress signal, because trees talk to each other through their roots and connective hyphae of um, of mycelia that live underground. So all of that went out. All that information went out from the redwoods, and there's a mycelia that sleeps underneath oak trees. And when the distress signal goes out, it wakes up that fungus, and that fungus spores. And when that fungus spores, it attracts these insects. And these insects come and they lay their eggs and stuff in the oak trees. They aerate the oak trees as they gestate and deform the tree. And so the tree is aerated. And when the fires happen that happen naturally as part of the ecosystem, the oak trees, the hardwood, burns hotter and faster to get rid of whatever the invasive species is. So it was created, this problem of the wildfires was created with that. It's a long fruiting cycle here. And during that time, people didn't want to pay for grounds maintenance. And in fact, we're planting this ivy, right? Oh, it's so pretty. Oh, it's drought resistant, but it's not a native species. And that wasn't taken into consideration. And so the problem was actually made worse, right? And so, our property that we have now, our second growth redwood property, we spend a lot of time and a lot of money on grounds maintenance for that reason, because it's been neglected for a very long time, and it's problematic. So we're footing the bill. We're footing the bill for decades and decades of neglect, ignorance, and greed, and poor decision making. And people who are native to California, because we are not native to California. I was born in the United States. My husband was not. We are both U.S. citizens. Um, People native to California largely resent my husband and I and others like us. Both sides, Republicans and Democrats. You know? So, sorry, Mel Gibson, don't agree with you. And sorry, Gavin, there's things you've done too, dude, that piss me off. All the mental health bullshit here in California, problem that has been created by these other issues, right? And that have been used to marginalize and minimalize opposing political voices in the state, and do very little to actually address the problems of that mental health pose with in the homeless population in particular, right? And then there's things that are outside of California's control. Like, we get a huge influx of homeless population from every place else in the country because of our climate. It's easier to live outdoors here. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's easier than living outdoors in someplace, say, like Montana or anywhere in New England or New York City. Or so we got people here from all over, you know? It's easier to live outdoors here than it is in the desert. So, people come here. People who already have some problems, right? Oh my gosh. Anyway, Anyway. Anyway. I'm with you, Gav, on being pissed off about sending our National Guard up to Oregon. Jeez. What a load of shit that is. Jeez. Totally not within his rights to do constitutionally. That's for damn sure. He has totally usurped states' rights on that. It's fascist. It's totally fascist. It's blatant fascism. That has been made possible by the cultural greed that has been festering for decades out here. So everybody shares a piece of the blame. They really do. They really, really do. Ah, yeah. Yeah. Anyway. So I saw Greta's supposed to be released today. Is everybody from her flotilla going to be released or just her? Like they did last time? The whole thing. The whole thing. She is she's a rube, but at some point, she's going to have to truly be held accountable. She's not going to be able to claim naivete or ignorance much longer. I still maintain that the best way to fight poverty, violence, and injustice is through sustainable economics for populations. You know, violence here in California is only going to get worse with the economic instability that we are seeing growing now at exponential rates. We need our National Guard here so that our governor can use it when it's going to be necessary, because it's going to be necessary, I'm sure. You know? And California has gone to great lengths to make sure that the majority of people in California don't have guns to be able to protect themselves against that. And then it's going to come down to, well, if you don't have guns to protect yourself, have you given money to the local policemen's association so that they're willing to come out and do their job when you're being attacked? Hmm. We have a landline, and we didn't have it right away. But the first phone call that I got after our landline went in was from the policemen's association wanting a donation. And I was like, I don't know anything about a policemen's association. What is. I said, if I don't donate, does that mean I don't get police service? And the guy laughed at me. Yeah. And I've gotten a couple of things in the mail from them, solicitations from them, after the fact kind of things, like after uh, I was given the runaround when we've had stuff damaged on property and I've called it in and nothing's happened, right? Can't even get like report numbers on stuff. And when they make reports, they're kind of falsified. They put stuff in them. I'm like, what the hell is that? When I've requested records, not actually reporting on what I'm calling about, but being like, oh, she was crazy, right? They do that. And I think it's because I won't donate to their policemen's association. So that's a corruption. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I don't know what the answers are. We just try to do what is best in the best interest of us and our property here for our survival, and it's not easy. It's not. Anyway. Anyway, I don't wanna talk about it anymore. I gotta go get showered.